The city lay in ruins, a ghostly skeleton of what it had once been. Smoke spiraled into a steel-gray sky, punctuated by distant flashes of fire and the occasional echoing boom of artillery. Sergeant Emily Carter crouched behind a crumbling wall, her heartbeat drumming louder than the explosions around her. The acrid smell of gunpowder stung her nostrils, and every instinct screamed at her to move. But where? Every street, every alley could conceal an enemy waiting to strike. Emily's squad had been tasked with a high-stakes mission: infiltrate enemy territory, retrieve critical intelligence, and return before dawn. Simple in theory, impossible in practice. She adjusted the strap of her rifle, eyes scanning the debris-strewn street ahead. Her squad should have been beside her. They should have been moving in sync, covering each other. But chaos had swallowed them whole. The first gunfire had come like a thunderclap. A sniper's bullet ripped through the air, striking the wall next to her with a deafening crack. Emily instinctively flattened herself against the rebel. Her mind raced. Where's Martinez? Torres? Where's everyone? She had no answer. Radio communications were dead, static replacing the voices she relied on. The city had become a labyrinth of shadows and death. In that silence, broken only by distant explosions and the hum of incoming mortars, Emily's thoughts flickered to home. Her younger sister's laughter, the smell of rain-soaked earth in her backyard, her mother's cautious smile. Memories she rarely allowed herself during training now surged, unbidden, reminding her of what she was fighting for and what she could lose. She shook her head, pushing the thoughts away. There was no time for fear. Only survival. A sudden flash of movement caught her eye. A patrol, 2 soldiers scanning the ruins for survivors. Emily's fingers tightened on her rifle. She counted the seconds, calculated her odds, and then she moved, silent as a shadow, slipping between collapsed buildings. Every step was measured, every breath controlled, but she could feel the tension gnawing at her chest. Each heartbeat reminded her she was alone. Her squad had trained for this scenario, separation in hostile territory, but nothing could truly prepare anyone for the sheer scale of chaos. Buildings that had once stood proudly now lay in jagged piles. Fires painted the streets orange, casting flickering shadows that played tricks on the eyes. The city itself had become an enemy, each ruin a potential trap. Emily pressed on, her body aching, the sting of a graze along her shoulder a constant reminder that luck alone wouldn't save her. She ducked into a narrow alley and found herself staring at a collapsed building. The entrance was partially blocked, but it offered cover. She crawled through the rubble, each piece of concrete shifting ominously beneath her hands. Dust choked the air, and her lungs burned with each inhale. At last, she found herself in a small, dimly lit interior, a temporary sanctuary from the chaos outside. She allowed herself a moment to breathe, assessing her situation. Her kit was mostly intact, though her first aid supplies were limited. Food and water? Nearly gone. Her rifle? Functional, but low on ammunition. The city, once a place she had trained to defend, was now a maze designed to strip her of every advantage. And then the quiet hit, a heavier silence than before, the kind that wraps around you and suffocates. Emily froze, straining to hear over her own ragged breathing. Footsteps, distant but deliberate. She flattened herself further against the wall, rifle poised. The patrol was approaching, unaware of her presence, scanning every shadow, and her pulse surged. The next few minutes could decide life or death. She thought back to her training exercises, to the nights spent learning to move like a phantom, to strike with precision. She could do this. She had to. Slowly, carefully, she inched along the edge of the building, the grit of rubble under her palms, the barrel of her rifle aimed with deadly intent. The patrol moved past her hiding spot, unawares. Relief surged for a brief instant, but she knew better to celebrate. Each second she survived only bought the next second of danger. As night descended, the city's ruins transformed. Shadows lengthened, turning streets into tunnels of uncertainty. Emily found a vantage point atop a partially collapsed structure, allowing her to see the surrounding area. The extraction point, briefed in the mission, was several blocks away, heavily guarded and likely impossible to reach undetected. Yet she had no choice. She was alone, injured, and the clock was ticking. Every moment spent hiding increased her risk, but moving too soon could be fatal. Her thoughts drifted again, this time to her squad mates. Had they survived? Were they hiding like she was, praying for rescue? Each memory of them, their faces, their voices, fueled her resolve. She whispered a promise into the wind, the kind of vow that only someone who faced death could make. I will make it out. I will survive. Suddenly, a sharp noise, metal scraping against metal, snapped her back to reality. She ducked instinctively as a piece of debris fell beside her. Heart pounding, she scanned the area. There, movement in the distance. A flash of uniform, a weapon raised. Enemy. Emily swallowed her fear, forced her trembling hands steady. She would fight if she had to, but the priority was survival, and she knew that discretion now outweighed combat. Hours seemed to stretch into eternity as she navigated the ruins, every shadow a threat, every sound a potential ambush. Hunger gnawed at her, the pain in her shoulder throbbed with every step, yet she pressed on. Each obstacle was a puzzle, each street a trap she had to outthink. And then, in the dead of night, she stumbled into a collapsed building, barely able to stand, sliding into the darkness of its hollowed-out interior. Inside, the dim glow of moonlight revealed the remnants of a once lively home. Broken furniture, shattered glass, walls pocked with bullets. Emily sank to the floor, exhaustion washing over her. She checked her supplies one last time. Ration packs, a single water bottle, a few rounds of ammunition. Not enough to last, but enough to survive another night. She pressed herself against the wall, rifle across her lap, eyes scanning the crumbling ceiling above. The city outside was quiet, for now, but she knew better to trust the lull. Somewhere beyond the rubble, enemies prowled. Somewhere beyond the fire and smoke, her mission and her life waited for resolution. And in the silence, a whisper barely audible even to herself, "I won't give up. I can't." As the first rays of a gray dawn began to seep through the cracks, Emily's resolve solidified. Alone, trapped, and battered, she was still a soldier, still alive. And as long as she drew breath, survival was non-negotiable. The camera, or in a YouTube adaptation, the viewer, lingered on her determined eyes, setting the stage for a journey of courage, ingenuity, and heart-stopping peril. The Warzone had claimed many, but Emily Carter was only just beginning her fight. The gray dawn offered no comfort. Broken sunlight filtered through the gaps in the shattered walls, painting the rubble in harsh, unforgiving light. Emily Carter rose from her huddled position, her muscles stiff from the night spent in hiding. Every step hurt. Her shoulder throbbed from the graze. Her ankle ached where it had twisted over debris. But hesitation was a luxury she couldn't afford. The city outside was alive with danger. Each street, each alley held threats she couldn't yet see. Her mission was clear, even in the haze of exhaustion: reach the extraction point and survive. But the path was far from simple. She moved cautiously, slipping between shadows, using broken walls and abandoned vehicles for cover. The sound of her own breathing seemed deafening. She kept glancing behind, half expecting enemy patrols to emerge from the ruins, weapons trained on her. Every step was calculated, every movement deliberate. Hours passed. Hunger gnawed at her stomach. Thirst dried her mouth. But she pushed on, fueled by instinct and sheer willpower. Then, through the haze of dust and smoke, she spotted movement, a figure lying prone in a narrow street. Emily froze, rifle raised. It was a soldier, but not one of her own. The uniform was enemy, bloodied and motionless. Her training screamed at her, avoid contact, but her humanity argued otherwise. She approached cautiously, checking for signs of life. The soldier groaned, stirring, clutching his leg where a bullet had torn through his uniform. Emily's pulse quickened. Helping him could reveal her position, could cost her life, but leaving him to die felt wrong. She scanned the streets around them, no immediate threats. She made a decision. Carefully, she dragged the soldier behind a toppled wall, applying pressure to his wound with her limited supplies. He whispered something in a language she didn't understand, eyes wide with fear and pain. Emily ignored it, focusing on stabilizing him. For a brief moment, her role as a soldier expanded beyond mission objectives. She was a protector of life, even in enemy territory. Suddenly, the distant bark of gunfire shattered the fragile calm. Enemy patrols were sweeping the streets. Emily froze. The soldier's eyes widened in terror. She grabbed his arm, shaking him gently. "Move, now," she urged, dragging him along as silently as she could. Every second mattered. Every footstep could be their last. They ducked into an abandoned building, collapsing inside a room littered with rubble and broken furniture. Emily helped the soldier to the floor, using her scarf to tie a makeshift bandage around his leg. The sound of distant shouting grew closer, sending adrenaline surging through her veins. She scanned the room, searching for an escape route. There, an open window, barely large enough to slip through, overlooking a narrow alley. Careful and quiet, she helped the soldier out. Each movement was a test of precision, every noise magnified in the tense silence of the war-torn city. Outside, shadows shifted. Emily's stomach twisted with tension. She realized that while she was risking her life to save him, she was drawing attention. But she had committed. Turning back was not an option. Hours passed as they navigated the city. Emily's knowledge of tactical movement kept them safe. She moved through alleyways, scaled low walls, and kept to the shadows. Occasionally, the soldier whispered in panic, pointing to streets and barricades. She understood enough to know they were approaching a heavily guarded area. Extraction was still miles away, and the enemy seemed to anticipate every move. As night fell again, Emily found a partially collapsed building that could serve as shelter. She set the soldier down, exhausted, and took a moment to survey their surroundings. The city was alive with chaos. Fires burned, distant cries echoed, and occasional gunfire reminded them both of the dangers waiting just beyond the walls. Emily considered her options. The extraction point lay to the east, but the patrols were increasing, and the terrain offered no clear path. Every choice carried risk, yet she could not stop. Survival demanded movement, ingenuity, and a willingness to take calculated risks. She decided to use the shadows to their advantage. Waiting for a patrol to pass, she guided the wounded soldier through a maze of debris and fallen structures. Every creak of wood, every crunch of gravel underfoot made her pulse spike. Yet with patience and calculated timing, they evaded detection. Midway through their treacherous journey, Emily stumbled upon a small group of civilians trapped in a collapsed building. The fire had weakened the walls, leaving them barely able to move. She froze, torn. Assisting them could compromise their stealth, yet ignoring them violated everything she stood for. She glanced at the soldier, who nodded weakly in understanding. Together, they carefully cleared debris, guiding the terrified civilians to safety. The operation was tense. Planks of wood shifted, dust filled the air, and each second felt like an eternity. Finally, they reached the outskirts of the ruin-strewn city. Emily allowed herself a brief moment to breathe, relief mixing with the ever-present tension. She studied the map she had memorized, plotting the final approach to the extraction point. Enemy patrols were fewer here, but vigilance remained paramount. She could feel the exhaustion pulling at her body, but the stakes demanded perseverance. As they moved, the wounded enemy soldier faltered, pain overtaking him. Emily had to make a choice: carry him, leave him, or risk slowing their pace and drawing attention. She improvised, fashioning a sling to support him. Every step was a battle, every decision a potential life-or-death gamble. The city seemed endless, a forgiving maze of concrete and fire. Suddenly, a flare illuminated the street ahead. Enemy soldiers were approaching, scanning systematically. Emily pressed herself against the wall, dragging the soldier into shadow. Their breaths were shallow, hearts pounding. She knew any mistake could end their lives. She counted the seconds, calculated their odds, and then acted. With a swift, precise motion, she hurled a small debris pile across the street, creating a brief distraction. The patrol's attention shifted, just enough for Emily and the soldier to slip silently into a narrow alley. The alley led them to the edge of a ruined bridge, overlooking the partially flooded streets below. Emily assessed the situation. The extraction point was within sight, but heavily guarded. She crouched, scanning for weak points, considering every strategy she had learned during countless drills. Her pulse raced. She had survived sniper fire, patrols, injuries, and exhaustion, but this final stretch could be her undoing. She whispered to the soldier, "We're close. One more stretch. You can make it." His eyes reflected fear and gratitude. Emily knew that the emotional toll on both of them was immense, but they had no choice but to push forward. Together they began the perilous descent from the bridge, the ruined city stretching endlessly below. The night was alive with danger, yet Emily Carter moved with precision of someone who refused to surrender. Each step, each decision carried the weight of survival. The war zone was merciless, but so was her resolve. And as the distant glow of the extraction point flickered in the distance, she felt the first flicker of hope, one that would be tested in the trials still ahead. The city was still alive with chaos, but Emily Carter's fear had sharpened into focus. Every ruined street, every shattered building now became part of her strategy. She was no longer merely trying to survive. She was learning to dominate the battlefield on her own terms. Her pulse raced, but it was no longer panic. It was precision, controlled and deadly. The wounded enemy soldier stumbled beside her, leaning heavily on her support. His groans echoed through the alleyways, each sound a potential giveaway. But Emily refused to slow. She had learned long ago that hesitation could be fatal. Every step forward was measured. Every shadow became cover. Every piece of debris was a tool. The first patrol of the night appeared around the corner. 2 soldiers, rifles raised, scanning for movement. Emily crouched behind a pile of rubble, calculating her approach. She could ambush them directly, but risked exposure. She could bypass them, but risked running into more patrols ahead. She decided on ingenuity. Quickly, she stripped a few loose bricks from a nearby wall and fashioned a small trap. Timing it precisely, she kicked a brick toward a metal drum. The loud clang echoed through the ruins, drawing the patrol's attention. They moved toward the noise, rifles swinging. Emily pressed the enemy soldier behind a low wall and slipped silently past them, moving into the shadows with the fluidity of someone trained for this moment. Every encounter reinforced her confidence. Emily realized that the city, once a labyrinth of threats, could now be manipulated. Fallen walls became choke points, shattered vehicles became barricades, and debris could be weaponized. She had survived the ambush, the snipers, and the chaos, but now she was fighting, not just fleeing. Hours passed in a tense rhythm of movement, evasion, and calculated strikes. She set traps, creating diversions, leading enemy patrols into dead ends. Each success was small but significant, an affirmation that she could survive and maybe even gain control. Yet exhaustion gnawed at her. Her shoulder throbbed with each movement, the wound deepening, and her energy was fading. As she guided the wounded soldier along a narrow alley, a sudden flare lit the sky. Enemy reinforcements were closing in. The glow revealed the collapsed building where she had hidden earlier. Shadows stretched across broken walls, revealing armed figures moving with deadly intent. Emily's stomach tightened. They had been spotted, or worse, tracked. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to calm. This wasn't the moment for fear. She scanned the surroundings, looking for leverage. Her eyes landed on a partially collapsed rooftop, low enough to climb yet offering a vantage point. With careful steps, she led the soldier upward, balancing him and herself as the enemy closed in. Bullets ricocheted from nearby walls, sending sparks into the night. Each shot was a reminder of how fragile her position was, but she pressed on. From the rooftop, she had a clear line of sight. Using the shadows, she targeted enemy patrols with precision. Her movements were controlled, deliberate. She could take down one soldier with a silenced shot, then disappear into the darkness. Her confidence grew with each success. The city, once hostile and unpredictable, was now her battlefield, and she had learned its patterns, its dangers, and its secrets. Amid the chaos, Emily's mind wandered briefly to her squad. Were they alive? Had anyone made it out? She pushed the thoughts away. There was no time for despair. Survival demanded focus. The wounded soldier beside her groaned again, pain etched across his face. Emily adjusted the sling she had fashioned, keeping him stable while plotting the final approach to the extraction point. The alley below opened into a wider street, littered with debris and abandoned vehicles. She could see the extraction zone, dim lights flickering in the distance, but enemy forces were thick in its vicinity. Emily's pulse quickened, but she didn't hesitate. Every step forward now required strategy. She found a stack of rubble and moved it into position, creating a temporary cover. Then, using her knowledge of enemy patrol patterns, she led the soldier across the street, narrowly avoiding detection. Suddenly, a grenade exploded nearby. Shrapnel flew, tearing through the air with deadly precision. Emily flung herself and the soldier to the ground, debris raining around them. Her ears rang, her vision blurred, but adrenaline carried her forward. She dragged the soldier into a nearby building, walls trembling from the blast. The enemy was closing in, relentless and determined. Emily's hands shook, not from fear, but from exhaustion and adrenaline. She took a deep breath, centering herself. This was the culmination of her journey so far. Every skill, every lesson learned in training, every instinct honed in battle would be tested in the next few minutes. She would fight. She would survive. She peered through a broken window, spotting enemy patrols preparing to sweep the area. Timing was critical. She whispered to the soldier, who nodded weakly. Emily formulated a plan: diversion, precision strikes, and rapid movement. She would lead the enemy away from the extraction point, creating an opening for both of them. The first phase of her plan unfolded perfectly. She triggered a small explosion on the opposite side of the street, drawing several soldiers away. Bullets flew, sparks igniting the night, as Emily and the wounded soldier moved quickly, silently toward the extraction zone. Every heartbeat was measured, every step counted. But the city was unforgiving. Another patrol emerged from the shadows, guns raised. Emily reacted instinctively, using the environment, throwing debris, creating smoke from a broken pipeline, and taking out the nearest enemy with a precise shot. The chaos bought them seconds, but seconds were all she had. Finally, they reached the perimeter of the extraction zone. Helicopter blades whirred in the distance, a glimmer of hope amidst the carnage. But the enemy had anticipated their move. Heavy gunfire erupted from barricades ahead. Emily's eyes narrowed. This was the final stretch, the ultimate test. She would not fail, not now, after everything. With a deep, steadying breath, Emily drew on every ounce of strength left in her body. She moved with purpose, dragging the soldier and using the cover of shadows to close the distance. Bullets tore past, shattering the ground around her, but she pressed on, undeterred. Her focus was unbreakable. The extraction point was close, survival was close, victory, or at least escape, was within reach. And in that tense, electrifying moment, Emily Carter became more than a soldier trapped behind enemy lines. She became a force of ingenuity, courage, and relentless determination, someone willing to face impossible odds and fight back with everything she had. The night had grown colder, the war-torn city silent in an uneasy lull. Emily Carter crouched behind a jagged wall, the wounded soldier leaning heavily on her. The extraction zone was only a few hundred meters away, the glow of its dim lights flickering like a distant promise. Every instinct in her body screamed urgency, yet she knew that one wrong move could end both their lives. Emily scanned the area carefully. Enemy barricades had been reinforced since she first spotted them. Soldiers patrolled methodically, rifles ready, alert for any movement. The extraction point wasn't just guarded, it was a fortress. The helicopter waiting beyond it was their only chance of escape, but the path there was a gauntlet. Her pulse surged, every nerve alert, but she held herself steady. This was the moment she had been preparing for since the ambush, fight or die. She whispered to the soldier, "We have to move now. Stick close. Trust me." His nod was barely perceptible, but it was enough. Emily took a deep breath, centering herself. Every training exercise, every lesson learned, every split-second decision she had made in the past hours coalesced into one singular purpose: survival. The first obstacle was a narrow street lined with abandoned vehicles, each a potential ambush point. Emily moved swiftly, leading the soldier through the shadows, her rifle poised. She paused only long enough to take calculated shots at isolated enemy figures, silencing them before they could alert others. Each shot was precise, each movement deliberate. Her body moved on instinct, yet her mind analyzed every possibility. A sudden flash of light illuminated the street ahead. Enemy flares had been deployed. Bullets whizzed past, tearing into the concrete around them. Emily dragged the soldier behind a crumbling wall, pressing herself against it. The soldier whimpered in pain. Emily's heart clenched, but there was no time to dwell on fear or compassion, not now. Survival demanded action. From her vantage point, Emily formulated a plan. Using the shadows and debris, she could create a path by diverting the enemy's attention. She grabbed a few loose bricks and tossed them across the street, triggering a chain reaction of noise and movement. Patrols rushed toward the disturbance. Emily seized the moment, leading the soldier toward a narrow alley that offered cover, but was littered with jagged rubble. Every step was perilous. A piece of concrete shifted beneath her boot, sending a cloud of dust into the air. She froze, counting the seconds as enemy eyes scanned the shadows. Then, slowly, she edged forward, heart pounding, muscles taut with tension. The soldier followed, trusting her completely, their survival intertwined. They reached a small courtyard just beyond the alley, but it was a trap. Enemy soldiers had anticipated their approach, forming a loose cordon. Emily assessed the situation quickly. A direct confrontation would be deadly. She needed distraction, ingenuity, and speed. Spotting a rusted fuel tank near a pile of debris, she realized the solution. With a swift motion, she threw a piece of rubble at the tank, igniting a small explosion. Flames roared, smoke billowed, and the enemy soldiers scattered, some taking cover, others disoriented by the sudden chaos. Emily grabbed the soldier's arm and sprinted toward the extraction point, using the fire and smoke as cover. Bullets cracked through the night, striking dangerously close, but she didn't falter. The helicopter's blades could be heard faintly, slicing through the chaos. Emily's muscles burned, her lungs ached, but she pressed on. The extraction zone was just ahead, illuminated by dim floodlights. Yet a final obstacle remained, a barricade of enemy soldiers with heavy weapons. They had positioned themselves perfectly to cut off any approach. Emily's mind raced. She scanned the environment, searching for any advantage. The rubble, the broken walls, the shadows, they were all tools. She identified a low wall to the side that offered cover and an elevated vantage point. Using a mix of agility and precision, she and the soldier darted from cover to cover, moving in short, controlled bursts. A soldier shouted orders, raising a heavy rifle. Emily froze for a fraction of a second, then fired. The enemy dropped, and chaos erupted around them. Using smoke and debris as shields, Emily advanced, dragging the soldier behind her. Her body screamed in protest, every movement a battle against pain and fatigue, but she refused to slow. Survival demanded speed and focus. Finally, they reached the perimeter of the extraction zone. Friendly soldiers fired from above, suppressing enemy fire. Emily and the wounded soldiers sprinted toward the helicopter, dodging gunfire that whistled dangerously close. The pilot shouted over the rotor's roar, gesturing for them to board. Emily hoisted the soldier into her arms, ignoring the searing pain in her shoulder, and leapt onto the helicopter skid just as enemy soldiers fired blindly in frustration. As the helicopter lifted off, Emily's body sagged with exhaustion, adrenaline finally beginning to ebb. She looked down at the war-torn city below, streets still burning, buildings still collapsing, but she had survived. Her chest heaved, her hands shook, but the sight of the city shrinking beneath them brought a strange sense of calm. She had made it through impossible odds, facing not just enemy forces, but fear, exhaustion, and doubt. The pilot shouted over the rotor wash, alerting them to the wounded soldiers and civilians being evacuated. Emily sat back, finally allowing herself to take a moment. Her eyes scanned the horizon, reflecting on the journey she had endured. Every narrow escape, every moment of fear, every decision had led to this, survival. The extraction wasn't just physical, it was emotional. She had faced the darkness and emerged alive. The wounded enemy soldier, now being tended by medics on board, met her eyes briefly. No words were exchanged, but a silent understanding passed between them. In the midst of war, humanity could still endure. Emily's thoughts drifted to her squad mates. She didn't know who had survived, who had been lost, but she carried their memory with her. Each life lost had shaped her, strengthened her, and fueled her determination. The mission was complete, but the war, like life itself, was ongoing. Survival was only the beginning. From the safety of the helicopter, Emily looked down one last time at the ruined city. Smoke spiraled upward, the night sky now tinged with the first hints of dawn. Her heart was heavy with the memories of those she could not save, but buoyed by the knowledge that she had endured, that she had fought, that she had survived. And as the helicopter flew to safety, Emily Carter knew one thing with absolute certainty. No matter the odds, no matter the darkness, she would continue to fight. She was a soldier, she was a survivor, and she had faced the impossible and won.